No,
And
but you say you haven't had a mystical experience. You mean a psychedelic experience?
no, that I've had, yes.
You've had psychedelic
Oh,
experience.
yeah.
Which kind of psychedelic experiences have you had?
Oh, I've done ayahuasca, and I've done, you name it. I've done
Right.
it.
So then you've done DMT?
Yes, and
Yeah,
I've done not mescaline, but the other one, acid.
Okay.
All of
LSD.
those.
No,
No,
but-
the experiences come actually from me. As I said, they're not a major. It's not the state of grace that these people are talking
You
about.
didn't experience a state of grace when you did DMT?
Not quite. No, not compared to what the NDEs.
Can I ask how many times you've done it?
One.
One time. Okay.
Yeah.
Did you do a lot of it?
I don't know.
You got to do a lot of it.
Yeah, maybe.
Did you just dissolve? Did you go to this crazy geometric infinite universe where you're
No, I didn't.
You didn't
No,
get in there
I
then?
didn't get in there then.
Well,
I might have need.
How long are you in town for?
Pardon?
How long are you in town for?
Only till tomorrow.
We're gonna have to make something happen. You gotta go deeper.
Yeah,
Like,
maybe.
that experience that people are having, a near-death experience,
Yeah.
is mirrored by the same experience. I'm sure you're aware of Dr. Rick Strassman.
Oh yeah, sure.
Sure. I believe actually he was
He's on the.
that's right. He's
But
in
I never
Natural
met
Egypt.
him when Chance was doing the.
Brilliant guy and
Yeah,
so important
I
because
gather.
what he has created by his book DMT, the spirit molecule, they did these clinical tests giving people DMT in a clinical setting and at the University of New Mexico, and what they found was these people achieve this incredible state of understanding, a more relaxed vision of the future. They're more confident. Like the idea. I mean, this is also mirrored by some of the Johns Hopkins tests that they've done with people with psilocybin, where people have. They have just a much better outlook about the future. They don't think that this is it, and that whatever happens to them when they're having these trips. And the way Strassman did it is much more intense than most people do it because they did intravenous doses, which last longer. A typical DMT trip lasts only about 15 minutes unless you just jump right back in, which is what I usually do. But he gave these people intravenous doses which take them just very deep for more than a half an hour. And they all had very similar stories, and similar stories to people that have had near-death experiences. I've had friends that have had near-death experiences, and when they talk about it, it's very similar to the way I've talked to other people that have had DMT trips, where they are in the presence of this divine greatness, this something. So,
That's right.
but that is also a chemical that's produced by the brain. Now, this is where neuroscientists step in and say, well, what you're experiencing is some sort of a hallucination. And they might be right, but it also might be some sort of a chemical gateway that your brain produces. When we really don't know. And that might be the way the soul, quote unquote, air quotes, whatever, but for lack of a better word, transitions to this next stage of life. Now, when the anecdotal evidence that you're talking about is measured up, what's interesting about it is similar accounts over and over and over and over again.
That's right.
The people that can remember things, they remember this incredibly divine experience. But the question becomes, is that experience, and this is something that I've been bouncing around in my head a lot lately, is that experience a hallucination, or is that experience an actual real experience in a divine presence? And does it matter? Because is it the same thing no matter what? If you just think you're experiencing God and divine greatness because you're creating it in your mind versus actually experiencing God and divine greatness, isn't the experience the exact same thing? And is our mind locked into the idea of a physical thing, like this laptop? I can pick it up, I can drop it, I know it has weight, I can touch it, I can measure the width. We can't do that with psychedelic experiences. We can't do that with transcendent experiences. We can't do that with mystical experiences. You can't measure them. You can't put them in a bag and take it home with you. But it might be the same thing. It's entirely possible that this is what many, many ancient cultures experienced as well. That they found the use of psychedelics very early on. And this is also something that you documented in your work. And they documented it very clearly in a lot of the Egyptian work. They had deep understanding and knowledge.
Exactly, Joe. This is one of the important things about the drugs and the NDE experiences. In my view, the NDE experiences more so because there's nothing in the way. There's nothing obstructing it. They're dead,
Right.
And this is where they go. With the drugs, you know you're you in these experiences, and the problem. Interesting. The problem. It's not a problem. It's the wrong word, but With the NDE experiences, I mean, absolutely, Joe Sixpack, everybody, ordinary people, many of them, some of them even atheists, go through this and come back, literally transformed. Their whole lives are changed by it. With the drugs, it really is, for the most part, it's a trip. It doesn't have this, let's say, this lasting transformational value.
It does on some people.
It does sometimes, yes.
Well, the Johns Hopkins study showed that a lot of people, decades later, had a vastly improved quality of life, different outlook on things, and especially when you're dealing with terminally ill patients.
Oh, well.
When they've given it to terminally ill patients, significant lessening of anxiety and fear of death.
Oh, sure, it would be. But the hallucination, this is another scam by the so-called rationalists, who in fact are not. They're this idea that it's a hallucination. And what's a hallucination? And what's its evolutionary value? Why should there be where's the hallucination gene? This is all bullshit, actually. And what it actually is not based upon reason as they promote themselves. What it is actually is the rationalization of their own inner emptiness. They can't handle the fact that there might be something else. And in fact, their whole intellectual lives are consecrated to proving that life is indeed as meaningless as their own.
But is that what it is, or is it they're just trying to look at some sort of give it a critical, objective view and go over all the possibilities? We know that drugs do affect the mind in very strange ways. We know some people take drugs and it completely distorts their reality. Alcohol is a perfect example of that, right?
Yeah.
It's a great drug for distorting reality. You can watch someone get drunk and have a very bizarre version of what they're looking at. There's many drugs that change the way people look at things, like physically, the way they see things.
Yes.
They will hallucinate. They do. So we know that drugs have an effect on people.
That's right.
I mean, it seems rational, though, that a scientist would look at those things and try to find some sort of a scientific explanation for the chemical process that's going on in the mind, the way it's affecting the visual cortex, and the things that the person is, quote unquote, hallucinating.
Underlying that contention, which is not science in and of itself, that is just a hypothesis. Mm-hmm. That is speculation. And I said what it's based upon is protecting their own vision of the world, which is that the universe is an accident, and anything that is mystical or so-called spiritual is hallucinatory, and they have the answers. And these people, as far as I'm concerned, are more dangerous even than politicians. They are. Put it this way: it's the Church of Progress is the religion of the emotionally defective, the spiritually dyslexic, and the philosophically depraved. But to put it into other terms, you actually, martial arts master I studied with briefly, used to say in his Japanese accent, if you want happiness in this crazy world, you do not talk about moonbeams to the blind, or moonbeams to the blind, music to the deaf, and you absolutely do not talk about sex to eunuchs. They just get angry, and this is what you're dealing with when you're dealing with these intellectually based scientists. These are spiritual, emotional, and philosophical eunuchs, and it's no surprise when they behave the way they do. Who's surprised? Who's surprised when the eunuchs snigger behind the Sultan's back, and deride his passions? The problem is that with our Church of Progress, when the eunuchs take over the palace and call their terrible disability reason, then the empire's cooked.
You sound like a person who's been deeply in the trenches against academics for years. You sound like a bitter man, John Anthony West.
No, I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter. I'm just realistic. I know what's involved from being in the trenches. I know what's involved in fighting this particular battle, which I've been engaged in all of these decades.
Particularly yours, because you've been dealing with archaeologists that are trying to refute evidence.
They're all just as bad as each other. What I bring to the table that my colleague Graham Hancock was an excellent writer, and some of the others who are very brilliant people, Rupert Sheldrake is also a very good friend and a very good scientist. What they are not is satirists by nature, and I am.